my secret. Just do something that ain't nobody ever done before, but make it sound like something that's always been there forever.
Hello, welcome to This Filipino American Life, a podcast that explores the nuanced experiences of Filipinos in the United States at iba pa. My name is Joe Bernardo, and I'm joined by my fellow hosts,
Ryan Carpio,
Elaine Delalis,
and
Mike.
Producer Mike.
Boom! Yay!
Yay!
welcome back
Welcome
to
back.
Berlado Studios.
Yes!
Yay!
Before we get into the episode, do we have a TFAL of the episode, Elaine?
Yes, we do. And let me look them up. And I should have had it ready, but I don't. We've only been doing this show since 2016, since before we had T-Pals. But I will have it right now. It is over.
I'm so waiting. So much anticipation.
Edge of my seat.
I should say, like, it's Caroline Calderon, so she could be the T-Bell for a third episode.
Again?
Again. Or it's Ben de Guzman, so it could be T-Bell episode again. It is Nicholas Clegg.
Ah,
Nick.
Wait, do you really
Clegg.
Do you know him?
St. Nicholas.
I do not know St.
Oh.
Nicholas.
You didn't know Santa Claus?
Ah!
Santa
See?
Claus.
Santa Claus.
Thank you, Santa Claus. Just kidding. Thank you, Nicholas Clegg, for being a Patreon.
We appreciate you.
Thanks, Nick. So today we are going to talk about documentaries.
What?
Yes.
Documenting our Filipino American stories.
You mean like This Filipino American Life?
Yeah, but like film documentaries.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're going to talk about film documentaries.
Sorry.
We're going to talk about Marissa Arroy. She's the filmmaker who did the film Delano Manongs.
Right on.
About the 1965 Delano grape strike. She's also working on a documentary on the Philippine-American War.
The what?
The Philippine-American
Oh my
War.
gosh.
What's
Yes.
Learn something, people. Let me Wikipedia.
Perhaps
it now.
one of the most important events in Philippine and American history. And it's kind of the catalyst of why so many of us are here in the United States.
There you go.
But before we get into that, I want to ask you all, do you watch documentaries?
Yes.
Yep.
Which ones do you like?
I like true crime.
You like true crime?
Yeah, because I just like to watch people murder people.
Oh,
and then
God,
get
so
solved.
What was the last one we watched? Was The Pharmacist or
The
something?
Pharmacist.
Oh, is
that
that
one
good?
was so good. It's about a pharmacist who attempted to take down the opioid pharmaceutical company in New Orleans.
Wow.
It was fascinating.
I liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you saw it too?
I did.
I did not watch that yet.
I did.
It's on Netflix?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like music documentaries a lot too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you all?
Go ahead, Mike.
Mostly music documentaries.
Mm.
Usually because like the kind of thing that you kind of put on the weekend, and you kind of watch, but you kind of don't watch, but you watch.
Yeah.
Like things like about like music scenes from like the 60s and 70s and 80s. I think the last one that I watched was, oh man, what was the one about?
We watched one about Michael Caine.
Oh, we watched the Michael Caine documentary. Oh yeah, because it was about kind of like the 60s kind of like culture in London.
Yeah.
So
Was his father Big Daddy?
Sugar.
Hurry? Si Hurry?
Hurricane.
And the daughter Candy? God, it's so corny, dude.
Dios mío.
I love it. Oh, I love it.
How about you, Ryan?
You know, I like documentaries, but I feel like I need to be in the mood for it. I don't know if you guys are, you know, I don't know. I think it's because I know it's not fiction, so I want to know. Okay, am I prepared for something like this? But I love documentaries. Everything from like Hero Dreams of Sushi to
Ryan Dreams of Sushi.
Ryan Dreams of Lechon.
to like some of the true crime, some of the true crime ones. Like on my list right now is like well, you guys talked about The Pharmacist. That's but there's a bunch of documentary like series out there in the past, like the HBO did. That was cool with Robert Durst and all that.
There was the Aaron
That
Hernandez
was-
one.
Oh, the
The
Aaron Hernandez one.
is interesting.
There's one called "Don't Fuck with Cats."
oh my gosh,
that
was-
one is so good.
it's so good, but it's also like
so terrible.
yeah, that was an interesting one that's on Netflix. But yeah, I love documentaries. I don't know if I've ever seen like a music one. I don't really remember, but there's fun ones like Exit to the Gift Shop or like
yeah.
the fire ones, both of them. or
Oh, those are
yeah.
great. Oh my god, those are
those
so
fire
good.
documentaries. I was like, what is this? And for the most part, when it comes to documentaries, most of the time, the reason I appreciate it is I go in there with absolutely zero expectations of what it is. It doesn't. It's not like a mainstream movie for me, like where you sort of have a preview that you kind of already know where it's going, right?
Yeah.
So, like for example, like Don't Fuck with Cats.
Oh,
I had no idea where that was going.
same.
Like I'm like, what is this about? Like the lady talking about cats, and then next thing you know, it's a murder mystery.
Wait,
Oh.
don't tell me. I haven't seen it yet.
No, but I mean,
But- that's not-
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wait, it's different from Cats, the music.
It is very different from Cats the musical. It's nothing like Cats the musical.
but yeah, I've loved documentaries for a while now. So
I love documentaries. Yeah, I'm every time Girly goes on my Netflix and you see all the suggested films, it's always like documentaries
Really?
and stuff they suggest. Yeah, I'm just such a documentary junkie.
yeah.
I love sports documentaries.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All the sports. My favorite sports documentary is the one with Bird and Magic.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that one's so good. And I read the book.
Oh, you did?
I read that book that it was
Yeah.
based on. It's such a good book, and it's such a good documentary.
Yeah. I love the sports ones. Obviously, I love the history ones. I like all of the whatchamacallit, just stuff that have to do with like real society and like things about capitalism or
Or
things
like,
about,
or politics or
Yeah, politics.
Like
Yeah,
like
Michael
13.
Moore's.
yeah, Michael Moore's. I love.
I
Yeah,
haven't-
13's good.
I haven't.
13's so
I couldn't
good.
watch that because it
It's
just
depressing.
felt like too
Yeah,
too much, too hard, like too real. I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, I liked it. But yeah, you have to be in a kind of a mood to watch some
Yeah.
of these things. Have you watched any of the Filipino or Filipino American documentaries?
Does Fall of the iHotel count?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was
And-
probably the one that really got me into just Asian American studies in general.
And then we
Yeah.
watched Mother or
Oh, yeah, Motherland.
Motherland, the one in
Mm.
we saw it at LA Asian Pacific Film Festival, the one where it's about like the birthing ward in the Philippines.
Oh, that's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Wasn't that nominated too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really good.
Yeah.
And I liked it because it was unique in that it didn't really have like a voiceover narration like thoroughfare. It just like dropped you in to the hospital and then you followed everybody. And then you just got into a groove with like, oh, this is about the hospital.
Yeah.
This is about these mothers and the nurses and et
Like
cetera.
no narration,
Yeah.
no talking heads.
There was nobody to like,
Yeah.
this is the person, my guide. So
Right.
I like those two.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the 30 for 30, the July 17th, 1994?
Isn't that about a bike?
No, so it's basically following like 4 different sports events that happened that day. One of them was like the Arnold Palmer's last game.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is the Knicks versus Houston, the NBA Finals.
Was it the O.J. Simpson?
And O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
So it had no narration, no nothing. It was just like all these different clips and footage that was
All happened
interspliced
on that
together.
day?
Yeah, all happened that day. Anyways, that's kind of a new way of doing documentaries,
Yeah.
which I kind of like too. Because like we talk about in an interview, it's the whole Ken Burns style gets very old fast.
Yeah.
But
and boring.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's of course still like a need for it, like
Mm.
kind of like a under stylized maybe or styled that way. A need for a standard.
yeah,
But I do agree, like there's new and more creative ways to do documentaries these days.
I do think with documentaries, the more like less talking head version of it is more attractive to me because of reality television.
Mm-hmm.
Because reality television has adopted that old docu-style
Got
way,
it.
where you'll watch like the slice of life of like the Real Housewives, and then they'll take a cut, and then you'll have a talking head of the Real Housewives commenting on the thing you watch.
Yeah. Or The Office.
Yeah.
Or
And so it's such a normalized style of viewing now that if I'm going to watch a documentary, I would want it to be different. Like,
Yeah.
I want it to be different from the Real Housewives. Because, like, you watch one Real Housewives, one Below Deck, one 90 Day Fiance. It's all the same.
Didn't know about any I don't watch any of those shows. But no, I
VH1,
totally get
like
it.
Love and Hip Hop. Like, I watch all the garbage TV,
Yeah.
and
No, I get
there's a routine to
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
And even fiction has that
Yeah.
kind of routine now.
Yeah, like
Modern
sitcom.
Family
Yeah.
And
They
The
adopted
Office.
that like as mockumentaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Filipino documentaries that I love and kind of show in my class is Follow the I Hotel, $1 a day, 10 cents a dance.
Gosh, yeah.
Um,
It's bringing me back to college.
I know.
Some of these, I haven't
It's
seen them in
funny
such a
because
long
you know
time.
I'm showing these documentaries, like, you know, a lot of students have never seen these.
Yeah.
And like it's like, oh, it takes me back to when I was in college.
But let's face it, before we saw it in college, like, how do you even access them, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to access documentaries. I think now that there's probably more access to them through, like, Netflix, especially how people can view movies now. I think it's great for documentaries. But back then, man, you know, when we were in college, like 5 years ago, sorry, just kidding.
5 years.
5 years ago, yes.
And
5
vicinity.
And vicinity. Man, we've done that joke so many times.
5 times 5.
times 5.
4 times 4.
but-
Come on.
But you know, you had to search it and you had to look. How do you find it? You know, you'd have to actually actively search it. Now it's at your fingertips, so I'm hoping more people can see it.
If you had a chance to produce a documentary, what would it be about?
So I haven't. I did actually record footage for a documentary about short flags.
Oh yeah,
that's right.
I forgot about that.
I kind of got pushed to the table because like life happened. So
And TFAL happened.
So I would love to finish that, like just to talk about the rise of like Filipino American involvement in the sport of short flags. And who knows, because cheer is such a big thing on Netflix, like maybe that could be something that can get done.
You
And
should
then
just have 6 of them.
6
Flags.
flags.
Wow. All the dated references that I have right now.
And vicinity.
And vicinity. But another idea I have is to document the experience of Filipino Americans in accordion culture.
Accordion?
Oh, we
Yes.
talked about this.
Yes. So apparently, there is a pocket of Filipino Americans in like the South Bay or whatnot who all took accordion lessons from one particular teacher, and they would compete in accordion contests.
That's awesome.
And former guest Christine Balance is actually a winner.
And former guest Freya Streller.
That's right.
Remember, I think we talked about it during the
Yes.
show. She played
And
the accordion.
Former
as a-
guest, well, Glenda, right?
No,
She doesn't play
She
accordion?
plays accordion?
she does. I know she plays piano.
Oh, she was in band also.
She plays a lot of instruments.
Girly
Right.
plays accordion.
What? So Girly could be in this
No, I'm just kidding.
documentary.
She doesn't.
That's
but
awesome.
yeah, I want to like how. It's like
Mhm.
because it's a portable piano.
Yeah.
Wait, well, didn't Francis
Collado
Collado, executive director of visual communications?
I don't know if that's common knowledge, but yes, he plays accordion.
So there's a lot of them.
What about you, Mike?
What?
If you had a documentary to
It would have been something kind of like something about like growing up Filipino in like the 80s, right? Because there's a lot of things about like the 80s and 80s culture that I'm fascinated with, but like how that's different as a Filipino kid
Yeah.
and kind of like youth culture from my youth, right?
Yeah.
So all the way up until like DJing becoming a thing,
Yeah.
and
that'd be
like
awesome.
all my friends having rice rockets,
Yeah.
to like kind of like the new brownness kind of movement that happened in the late 90s to
90s.
early 2000s,
Mhm.
you know, and just kind of that evolution of from just knowing you're Filipino to that becoming emblematic with certain things like hip hop to like becoming its own thing, kind of like as we became kind of young adults. I mean, I think that would be fascinating. That and like something about like also connecting to the historic Filipino town, I think. So very kind of like my experiences are things that I've seen.
So life of Mike.
Yeah, I guess so.
No, I would want to do something like that, like a documentary on like Filipino youth culture, Filipino American youth culture specifically. Just going into like the trends, the party crews, like the talk about
kickback cruise,
the Filipino American Renaissance, what Mike was talking about, but also like the fashions, just something to document that. That's one thing. I would do like so many different like historical periods.
Oh God, I wasn't gonna go there, but
yeah, I'll be documenting on that. But yeah, I love documentaries. I always want to be part of one. But we are going to interview somebody later.
Yes.
And she's actually going to do something on the Filipino American War. Just real quick, when did you first learn about the Filipino American War?
Well, it wasn't in school.
College, I guess, right?
probably college for me.
Yeah.
But like not even like by reading history books or anything like that. Like it's usually in conversation about certain people. So I knew about certain people in the war, like in that era, like because of Philippine money. When I growing up, I think Bonifacio was on a coin. Aguinaldo was on like I don't know,
$5.
Five
She was the 5 pesos,
something like
the 5
that.
peso bill.
And so you sort of have a knowledge of like what that is as a kid, but I didn't go to school there, so I didn't learn about all of that until later, probably around college time.
I'm trying to remember because I think it might have been around college because folks were talking about Philippine Independence Day, June 12th, and I remember telling my dad like, "Oh, do we celebrate this?" And he was like, "That's not the real Independence Day, because the Americans were in the Philippines until July 4th, and that's the real." And I was just like, why are you so angry? I don't understand. But it must have been college that like, because that's when I learned about June 12th. And then I remember, around then.
Mike?
Yeah, I was in college. And so like, I mean, my parents we never really talk about this kind of stuff. And so when I was in college and I think it was a lot of documentaries again. And like in like Filipino American history. Was it Filipino American history class that we took?
With Damien Woods?
No. What's her face?
Dorothy?
No. Anyways, just, understanding that there was like a Spanish-American war, that part of it was in the Philippines, and then somewhere along the line, et cetera, and then Philippines getting like, independence, quote unquote, after World War II, right? I mean, that's the extent of like my knowledge of things, and then college was like filling in those blanks. So.
Yeah, I learned about it in high school. It's kind of independent research. But I really just didn't understand kind of the brutality of it and kind of like its impact until college. That's when I learned about it. And it's just amazing to me how many people just don't know about it. Filipino Americans and Americans in general. I still encounter people who have never heard about it and are just so surprised when they hear about it. And then growing up, I was like, man, there's got to be some kind of documentary. But lo and behold, Marissa Oroy is going to be working on this. So
That's awesome.
So stay tuned. We are going to talk to Marissa Oroy, and she's going to talk about her work as a documentarian and a filmmaker in general. And she's going to talk about her kind of upcoming project on the Filipino American War. So stay tuned.
Hey, do you know of a way that I could support TFAL besides being on the show and giving you all this cool entertainment?
How?
Hey, Mike, do you know of a way?
No.
Jeez. Come on, guys. I know of a way. I could buy Ryan a Ko-fi.
A Ko-fi?
What's a Ko-fi?
A Ko-fi is a way that I can give TFAL some money just for a one-time situation. Like if I have an extra $10, I'll buy TFAL a $10 cup of coffee.
Do we
cool.
actually get Ko-fi?
We
Coffee?
get the money, so
Oh.
it's like that's the coffee.
That's cool.
Ko-fi.
Isn't there a subscription service too?
Yeah, you could be a TFAL Patreon.
Oh, how does that work?
You contribute monthly by like $5, $10, $15,
$100?
$100. If you want to do $1,000 because you're just so inclined. But yeah, you become a TFAL Patreon, and by doing so, we shout you out on the episode. You are the TFAL of the episode, and we do things on our special Patreon sometimes. But yeah, you could buy us coffee, or you could monthly subscribe or monthly contribute to us.
Oh, and we could buy all this new equipment.
Yes.
Yes, and we could go to different places to interview people around the country.
Yes, and you support this entertainment that you are getting for free.
Oh man, that's
We
so
are
awesome.
doing this for free, aren't we?
Because
Yeah.
I'm sick of spending money, my own pocket money. I'm doing it because I have a lot of bills too. You know.
That's right.
Yeah, so if you really love TFAL and you ever thought, I want to help those folks out, be a Patreon or buy us some Ko-fi.
And where do you go?
You go to thisfilipinoamericanlife.com, and under support, there'll be links for the Patreon and for the Ko-fi.
Cool.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Woo!
Woohoo!
We are back from our break.
Yes. That was a good break. Oh,
Yeah.
chicken.
And we are here to talk to Marissa Arroy.
Yay, Marissa.
Yay.
Hi, Marissa.
Hi guys. Hi guys. Thanks for having me.
Is it Arroy or Aray?
Oh, God.
Oh, snap.
She hasn't heard that one before, right? You haven't heard that one.
I actually haven't heard that in a while. It
Ah.
takes like pure Pinoys to get that. That's a deep one.
Well, it's
yeah,
a
there's a song. There's a song that goes like arroy 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 arroy, and my grandmother used to sing it all the time.
Oh, interesting.
It's going to be our new theme song.
So how did you
Oh
get
God.
how did you get the last name Arroy?
We have no idea.
Huh.
Actually, my father, when he was alive, we would have this discussion every once in a while. Where is Arroy coming from? Is it short for Arroyo? And then one day he saw a Thai coconut milk called Arroy D.
Oh,
And he's like, I think that's our family. Those are our family members. That's where we come from, probably. And I think I went into a Thai restaurant and asked them about Arroy, and they said that in Thai it means delicious.
Ah,
So
That's
go
cool.
figure. I don't know.
So you're
Yeah.
Marissa Delicious?
delicious.
That's cool.
It's almost
yeah, that's
like
my
Marissa.
DJ name.
Marissa, ouch, delicious. Do both.
Oh, you get like, yeah.
So Marissa,
Yeah,
we're
both
talking
sensations.
we're talking about documenting our histories, documenting our Filipino American stories. But before we get into how you became a documentarian, I wanted to ask you, how did you kind of grow up? Where did you grow up? When your parents came to the United States, all that stuff.
Yeah. So my parents are very similar to so many of the other 1960s wave of Filipino immigrants. My father was in the U.S. Navy. My mother was a nurse. They came over in the 60s. They met in Boston at a party, a Filipino party. 3 days after they met, my father proposed.
Wow.
Whoa.
Love story. Wow.
Yeah. That was it.
And so how did you grow up? Or where did you grow up?
I was born in Boston, but then we moved to California because we had a great uncle. My father had a great uncle who was he was pretty much my grandfather. and my grandmother in Delano, California. So after he got out of the Navy, and he was actually in the Coast Guard, we left for California for greener pastures than to see if he could be part of the business that Grandpa Arroy had there. And Grandpa was one of the manongs of that generation of Filipino men who came over. They were cicadas. They worked in the plantations in Hawaii for a while, and then he moved over to California and picked grapes, and then built up a business, a bar, a barber shop, a gambling hall. But the gambling hall was sort of on the down low.
Yeah.
Is the bar still in Delano? And the barbershop?
No. So no, it was torn down in the mid 90s at some point. And it's really too bad because there was this great old neon sign that said Arroyo's Bar. And he was called Arroyo because all of the Mexicans in Delano they didn't know the name Arroy, and it just made sense to them that he was Arroyo. So he was always Mr. Arroyo to people in Delano.
Oh, fascinating.
So, you recorded and you documented a lot of that history through your film, Delano Manongs. Before we get into like the actual film, like what inspired you to become a documentarian and like recording and documenting our histories?
I just loved movies. I mean, not even documentaries. I just loved movies. And it was probably the thing that bonded me and my father the most. I mean, we didn't get along outside of going to the movie theaters, watching movies like James Bond or anything that was there in Bakersfield, California. We ended up living in Bakersfield, not in Delano, because Delano was too small for my parents. But and so growing up, when people would say like, oh, you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer and stuff, I really was nursing this dream to work in film. And I remember saying that to my father at some point when he was like, okay, so it's, time for you to pick a college, and what are you going to do? And you can be an accountant, you can be a lawyer, you can be a doctor. And that was it. And I was like, no, Papa, I want to make movies. And and the reaction I got was like, straight up, no, what are you talking about? You're a woman, you're a minority, you don't know anyone in that industry, no. And so undergraduate at Boston College, I was like a pre-med major, basically.
Like a lot of us.
Oh, that's so fascinating. Yeah, I mean, we all, it sounds so sad to say, like, it's such a commonality, like it's a common story. But then you're a pre-med major, so how did it go from pre-med to the creative side, or the documentary side, or filmmaking side?
So I was pre-med, but my major was psychology because I was always sort of interested in what motivates people, what makes people tick. And so there was that. But I delayed any idea of going to medical school by going into the Peace Corps for 2.5 years. So that there I was able to kind of, I guess, have the balls to actually tell my parents in fax, right? There's no like cell phones at this time when I went to Peace Corps. So I remember writing a fax to my parents and saying, I just want you to know, I don't want to go to medical school.
Wow.
You're so brave over a piece of paper that goes through a telephone line.
I have to say, I have never faxed anything to my parents in my entire life. That is balls right there.
Thanks, guys. It was I don't know why I was sweating doing it. Yeah. It took me being how many thousands of miles away to be able to say that.
You had the
But I
bravery
think
the bravery of distance.
Yep.
Yeah.
the bravery of distance, totally. um, I think my father he never said, okay, then. But when they came to visit me in the Dominican Republic, he brought a still camera, like a Canon still camera, and gave it to me. And it was sort of his way of saying, okay, then if this is your journey, start it now.
That's cool.
That's like so Filipino,
Yeah.
right? That's like that kind of gesture is like it does. He probably didn't say anything, but
Yeah.
It was his endorsement.
yeah,
Nope.
Yeah.
It was his endorsement.
yeah. Okay, so you got into filmmaking. How did you kind of get into it, like professionally, kind of more seriously?
Well, I think that experience in the Dominican Republic really changed the course of where I was going to go in terms of filmmaking. Because when I was there, I worked on my first ever video, which was about HIV in the Dominican Republic and interviewing people who were HIV positive at a time when nobody was talking about HIV or AIDS or the fact that anyone could get it. There were still rumors and myths about HIV in the country, and the government wouldn't even acknowledge it. So it felt like it was the first time I really saw maybe nonfiction or documentary as being a powerful tool to change people's perceptions. And so from there, I didn't even call it documentary necessarily. It was just like, oh, okay, well, I did this. And then I remember traveling around in South America and seeing a National Geographic based on what I was in a museum, and there was a little National Geographic video about this mummy. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to make movies about real life. I didn't even call it documentary. I just thought, oh, I want to make National Geographics. Yeah. And so when I came back to the US, I read an article in the San Francisco Chronicle about some man who was making a movie about the lost Incan gold in Ecuador. And I had just been in Ecuador. And this is the time in like the internet where if somebody had an email, you could pretty much find anyone's email now, but it was super easy for me to get in contact with him. And this man met me for coffee, and I just asked him flat out, like, how do you get into this? What should I do? And he suggested I go to UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism.
Go Bears.
And specialize go Bears, specialize in documentary film. And so that's what I did.
So does it work like not regular, but like more entertainment type of films where the industry it's all about like who you know? Is it the same? Does it work the same way in these kinds of films?
I mean, it certainly helps to have more connections. And it's like any industry, right? Like if you have connections to be able to get better positions, better resources, better support, then you're that much more ahead of everyone else. So yeah, I think I got out of grad school and I felt very resentful of people who had the resources and the support to just start doing what they wanted to do in terms of making their films. So I feel like I had to really hustle. But having said that, out of grad school, I think I got the best job. I was able to get a job with a Japanese American filmmaker on an HBO documentary. And working on that, it was just the two of us. He did camera, I did sound, I was his associate producer. I learned so much from him. He was a hard man to work for, but I learned everything about documentary film and how to interview people, how to just really take time to figure out the story, and what will work for an audience, especially for an HBO audience, because you're really trying to think of like, okay, what's going to appeal to a mainstream audience or an HBO paying audience.
Oh, so HBO documentaries are different from like PBS documentaries, like in terms of the style and
Production, probably.
Production. Yeah. Huh. I thought they're all the same.
Yeah. It sort of just depends on the filmmaker, but HBO documentaries, no, they're curated in a different way. They have a different mandate, really. They're there to, there's definitely more of an entertainment value that is considered for HBO. They're more salacious, but they're also like more hard hitting, and they can put things in there, sex, drugs, whatever, violence that they want, because they're HBO. They're not PBS. PBS is very censored.
This is Ryan. How do you even start getting
Hey,
funding for being a documentarian? Is it like grant funded? Or usually, are you hustling for grants, or is it just like self funded? But yeah, how do you even start that?
Yeah, for me, it was a lot, and it still is a lot of grant writing. And the problem with that is that you can't, to do that, it's going to take you forever to make a documentary. So Delano Monongs, for instance, it took 7 years from like the time that we came up with the idea and just writing the grants and applying and getting rejected and applying again. And then realizing like what the game is. The game is that you have to meet those entities and you have to talk to them. And I'm fortunate enough that my husband and I worked together. He was the producer of Delano Monongs. And when we didn't get a documentary grant, that we were pretty sure we were a really good candidate for this one grant, because we had gotten development money from them beforehand. So this production money, which was a lot of money, we didn't get it. And it was really my husband who fought for us to get that money in a way that I was sort of done with that organization when they rejected us. I was like, screw them. I'm never going to apply for a grant from them again. I hate them. And it's like, it's like not going to get me anywhere. But that was, we just got rejected. So I was very hurt. And his way of dealing with it was he got us a meeting with them. He told them that they were putting us out of work, that they had raised our hopes because they had given us development funding. He really clawed his way into getting us money, and we eventually got funding from them. They found funding a different way, but we got the full funding from them. And that's just how it is. You have to fight for this money. Even if it's an application, you send it off online and you never see these people. You have to figure out who they are and try to get to them and talk to them. And if you can see them face to face, it makes it much harder for them to reject you. Even though they might have I'm going off, guys. I'm sorry. I'm like,
no, that's fine. That's fine.
But it's like, even when they have a jury panel to choose the projects that they're going to fund, if you get to know the people who are administering this grant, they can help you. They can give you tips. They can give you advice on how to write a grant application that fits for their purpose.
Wow, this is very like educational and informative, because it's like you have to play the game in terms of like politicking into getting the grant funding.
And it's like relationships are like that too, right? You kind of want to see, like sometimes when it's just on paper, so like a personal touch is always kind of good. But congratulations on that. I mean, that's a lot of hustle, and that's like the fruits of your labor, right? Is you get a documentary even after 7 years. So kudos to you and your husband.
Yeah.
Are there types of documentaries that get funded more than others?
Yes, certainly. there's just like hot topics that happen. So right now, what would be a really hot topic is what's happening on the border, what's happening with Syrian immigration. It's just what's happening with climate change, for instance. There's a formula to a lot of these documentaries, and it's just the same as like narrative films, like your blockbuster films. There are certain trends, like you'll have werewolf movies a lot. The same thing with like documentaries. You'll have a bunch of climate change movies. You'll have a bunch of movies about food and the industrial food complex. So yeah, the hard thing is there's never going to be a trend for Filipino films.
Yeah.
It's going to be a niche market. It's always going to be a niche market.
Yeah.
Unless
Something's changed.
it's like
but
about Imelda Marcos.
yeah.
Which is coming out.
Or it came out already.
Or it's supposed. Oh, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kingmaker,
Yeah.
which is a remake of
Kingmaker.
Ramona Diaz's
Like
Imelda.
Imelda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was a features programmer for the Los Angeles Asian Pacific American Film Festival for like several years.
Oh, I love that festival.
And I remember when I would have to screen featured documentaries, like depending on the year, you would see a trend. So there was one year where it was all Fukushima documentaries about the aftermath of what the impact was. And it was like documentary after documentary after documentary. And I'm like, I'm tired of this nuclear aftermath porn, because that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's almost like something drastic needs to happen in terms of like what the trend will be. So it is no surprise that like border stories is a big thing. The Syrian crisis is a big thing. And like, so it needs to be like, I at one point, I think for Filipino film, it was like Duterte drug stuff.
Yeah.
That was like it wasn't really documentaries though. That was the like fictionalized stuff that was coming out. That's a trend. So we need to get
Wow. Yeah.
like we need to get whatever Marissa's films to get that on a
Oh my
trend.
God. Yeah, it's not trendy, guys. History is not trendy. Yeah.
You should do a lot of
rejection.
You should do a lot of wrongfully accused documentaries, because they seem to be all over Netflix.
You know?
Oh yeah.
Wrongfully accused.
Like Making a Murderer, or like what's the other ones? Yeah.
Right. Well, there was the one by Marty Sujuko and Michael Collins. Oh shoot. Oh man. But that was about a wrongfully accused. And no, Marty Sujuko is the author. Give Up Tomorrow. Yeah, no, it is Marty Sujuko and Michael Collins.
That's a Filipino one?
Give Up Tomorrow. That is a Filipino documentary. They made it. They're Filipino and American filmmakers, and they made a film about a wrongfully accused man in the Philippines.
Oh, I never
Yeah.
saw that one.
Yeah, no, it's good.
So what kind of documentaries do you like?
I like a bunch of different ones. Everything from Super Size Me, which personally affected me. Hoop Dreams. I love just seeing the tragectory of these boys going to men and their dreams of being basketball stars. And Inconvenient Truth, like we're talking about climate change, like that was the big one. That was the one that kind of woke a lot of people up. I also like musical documentaries. So Buena Vista Social Club was beautiful and just lovely to look at. And Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control it's just a fun documentary, of eccentric people. And then one that's more like a portrait is American movie about a filmmaker in Middle America trying to make his film Coven. That's a really fun documentary.
So the elements of documentaries, do you like talking heads? Do you like first person narratives? Do you like those elements, or are you the type of documentarian who doesn't use those things? Well, obviously, the Lana Manongs use talking heads, but what do you think of those other devices?
I'm tired of them.
You're tired of the talking head device?
Yeah, isn't everyone? Like, how do you get around it? This is like the big question for me. Because I have this documentary, this historical documentary I want to do. The people who know most about it are historians. I'm getting information from them through their books and doing pre-interviews with them. And what am I going to do? Am I going to put them on camera? And do I want to watch that? I don't know. No, not really. This is my biggest challenge, is trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to make this documentary something that I'd want to watch? Because when I get home, I want to watch something like Ragnarok on Netflix.
You can make a documentary about a hero who has escaped and found their own island.
Yeah.
I thought you meant Hero and his dreams of sushi. I was like, oh wait, that's different.
Okay,
High five.
that would be good. Well, that's good. That one's good. So it's a question as well. Like, okay, well then, do you fictionalize this? Do you try to find, because there's some really good stories here in about the Filipino American War, and how do you tease it out so that it has the same emotional impact that a narrative fiction film has?
Yeah, because then, I mean, if you're just doing like Ken Burns version of the Filipino American War, it's going to be, I don't know how people are going to take it. It's kind of been done before. I don't know.
And that's just so boring.
Yeah.
Ken Burns documentaries,
It is.
They're interesting, but it's like you have to get through 4 hours of.
You mean 4 weeks?
4 hours of 4 weeks of whatever subject he's talking about.
I mean, Ken Burns is so
Exactly.
Exactly. There's a filter on like video things where like you can do the Ken Burns effect. Like on slideshows, and it's like a very specific like technique of like slideshows, because it's like, oh, Ken Burns does it in every documentary.
Yeah.
So.
Right. It's take a photo, zoom in, very slowly. The narrator speaks like this.
Yes.
For 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. I know exactly what you're talking about. But, the argument can be made as well that as Filipino Americans or as Filipinos, we need something that's just wintergreen, classic, standard. This is the history, because no one has talked about it that way. Like, so many people don't even talk about the Filipino American War and use that term, Filipino American War. So I have one funder, the Center for Asian American Media, that's like, we need that evergreen history that can just, stand the test of time.
Right.
So
and I want to try to figure out, well, what are the different ways of trying to tell this story? And I don't know. I don't have the answer yet.
Well, since you brought it up, you are going to do a project on the Filipino American War. How did that come about? Why did you kind of choose this topic as your kind of next project?
Honestly, do you know who Gina Apostol is? She's
Yes.
an author, a writer. So she's one of my New York Barcada friends, a group of Filipino and Filipino American writers in New York. We get together, or we used to get together when I lived in New York. They still do. And we basically just ate Filipino food and chismade and talked shit. And she was writing she was writing her book, Insurrecto, and another novel that she's working on. And she just kept saying, you should do a documentary about the Philippine American War. You should do a documentary about the Philippine American War. And it just kind of stuck with me. And I remember talking to the Center for Asian American Media about this. And they funded the Delano Manongs and Little Manila, Filipinos in California's Heartland, which I made for California, for PBS as well. And when I told them the two ideas I had at the time, they were like, no, make that one, the Philippine American War. That's the one. And they gave me some development money for it. So that's what I'm working on.
So how's that going so far?
Fascinating. I mean, the part where you do the archival research and find photos and actually find like little bits of motion picture, all of that stuff is so much fun to me to figure out. And then talking to the historians about it, like I've gone to one AAAS, the Association for Asian American Studies.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes.
Asian and Asian American Studies. So I've met a few historians and I've put them sort of on this advisory panel, and I'm getting all this information from them as well. I love that part, like all of this gathering. And it's sort of, they've kind of pointed out some key characters that are really interesting, fascinating people who changed the course of the Philippines.
So are you going to how are you going to kind of bracket the Filipino American War for like what time period to what time period?
Oh, well, you know, it's 1898 to 1902, roughly, right? Except it wasn't, because you know, wars, they last longer usually, and some of like the worst atrocities happened after 1902. But I think that has to be there. And then I think for an audience of today to understand that, you have to sort of put it into context why that history matters to us now and has sort of shaped us. It has shaped us to being where we are, both like as Americans and as Filipino Americans.
Oh, so you're going to tie it into like Filipino immigration.
I think you have to. I think you have to like state, especially for Filipinos, you have to state like how this has affected us.
Mm-hmm.
And I also imagine it depends on what audience you're trying to tackle, right? Or grab. Because when you talk about Philippine American War, it would grab me as a Filipino American, right? The Philippine American War.
Yeah.
To learn more about like my past, as opposed to the Filipino audience from the Philippines who probably have that in their curriculum.
Or like a American, like
Or-
non-Filipino
exactly.
American audience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like I think that's great. Like I agree that you sort of have to tie it into why does it matter to me? Why does it matter to me as
Is this Ryan?
Yeah, it's Ryan. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Ryan.
Hi.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. There's been this way that I've talked about it. So Ramona Diaz is an executive producer, and she kind of took, how do I say this? Not took offense, but the way I was discussing the history when I was fundraising, I was discussing it like, never before heard of, people don't know and stuff. And she sort of corrected me and said, well, actually, Filipinos know this history. They learn this history. And so it made it clear to me, like, okay, I come from a very Filipino American perspective. And so that's where it has to come from. That's my audience first. And then everyone else comes after that. So to me, it's the Filipino American audience that I care about, learning this and like having it affect them. Then I also have to think about the mainstream audience, because if I don't think about that, it won't get broadcast on in the US. So I have to round that out in a way. and explain enough so that it appeals to them. And then after that, we'll see like if the Filipino audience can be grabbed in the Philippines. And, do things have to be changed so it's not so explanatory, and we can get maybe deeper into other things, or like, slice off that first part that's just introductory.
So
These are all the things you have to think about with the audience.
So there's been a few documentaries done on the Filipino American War, or at least kind of alluding to it. Memories of Forgotten War, Savage Acts, Bontoc Eulogy, Inner Image. What do you think are you gonna kind of take from
Inner
it? Or
Image I haven't seen.
Oh, okay. Actually, I have a bootleg copy of it if you want.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Just kidding. Joe doesn't have that.
Legit
We
copy.
don't advocate that.
Oh, but from these
We'll talk later.
from these documentaries, what are you gonna take from that, and what do you
Yeah.
think are you gonna do differently?
Yeah. No, I've watched all of them except for the last one you said. And I think all you can do really is watch them and then put them away. And then however it sinks into you or doesn't, or affects the way you tell your story, or the way I tell my story, I don't know how it's going to affect me. I think probably Bontoc Eulogy was the most affecting in that he was so artistic about the way he used the archival footage to create like basically a fictional film about the Philippine American War, but it was so effective. And so what I'll take away from that is that, okay, are there other ways of telling this that will be more emotionally driving than the Ken Burns way?
Have you seen American Factory?
No.
Oh, okay. I actually watched that yesterday, but I thought it was pretty effective. There was no narration at all. It was just all, following all this different footage, and using all this footage and splicing it together. I thought it was pretty effective. But
Kind of harder for the Philippine American War, though.
no, I know.
Yeah, I'm like,
Right.
Footage?
Yeah.
footage from the 1900s, the 1890s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So other than that, you actually worked on a mini documentary on Filipino nurses. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Yeah, I have a good friend who's been with the National Nurses United and California Nurses Association. We were actually classmates. Aaron and I were classmates at UC Berkeley's School of Journalism. And she was always but she talked about like, oh, let's work on a documentary about the Filipino nurses. And last year we put it into play. So we did interviews with a number of the National Nurses United and California Nurses Association board members who are Filipino, talked about what they went through, and then went to the Philippines to actually follow the very first union president who's Filipino, Zeni Cortez, back to the Philippines, where she was giving a keynote speech to the Filipino Nurses United Union about lessons that she's learned and hoping to bring to them so that they can get better wages and better working conditions there. And so that was a really lovely experience to be there with her, and also just to meet the first union president, first California Nurses Association and National Nurses United union president, who's Filipino.
So what do you think of doing those mini documentaries and those things that kind of go viral? How does the industry kind of look upon those?
Oh, it's a good question, because that I think is what I want to do with the Philippine American War is cut it up, right?
Yeah.
Let people like decide, okay, I'll watch this one about David Fagan, the
yeah.
black American soldier who defected and joined the Philippine Army. I want to make a short one about Dean Worcester, who was the anthropology student who basically exploited Filipinas and took thousands of naked photos of them in, you know, as anthropological studies of them. So there are all of these little stories that I think make great short documentaries. I love it. I think there's a bigger audience for it. It doesn't have the. So here's the thing: it doesn't have the prestige that doing a feature length documentary, an hour and a half documentary gives you as a filmmaker. Right? You're not going to get into film festivals with a bunch of short little docs. You're not going to be up for an award, an Emmy or an Oscar, unless it's a 30-minute short documentary.
But more people are going to see it.
But more people are going to see it, and that's really, to me, the most important thing.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in potentially breaking up the narrative.
Cool.
Especially because you're sort of competing with all the other media related things that we consume, as streaming is more popular these days, and YouTube and all that. So documentary on that list for people to consume in Ken Burns style, which is very, very long, as opposed to something you cut up. I think that's a great idea. I think it's a great idea that reaches a lot more people. So,
are there more room for documentaries now that there's streaming, like Netflix and Amazon, etc.?
Oh yeah, there are. Okay. There people are definitely looking. I mean, platforms are definitely looking for content, and they're and even Netflix is putting out a lot of crap content.
Yeah.
Almost just trying to churn out more and more to keep you interested and make you look at least for 5 minutes at something. So yeah, there are opportunities out there for more nonfiction stuff, for sure.
So as a Pinay, what barriers do you have? I mean, obviously in life, but in the kind of documentary industry.
I think I have more advantages now that I didn't see before. And I think it has to do with people wanting to have more diversity of story, more diversity of of storytellers, gender parity. Those things are starting to affect to give me more opportunities. I think the last time I felt like there were barriers was when I was starting out, and for jobs like camera jobs, I was told, oh, well, that's going to be a really physical camera job. It's a piece about for the military channel, and you're going to be following Marines. And it was like, well, I'm at physical peak here. That wouldn't have been a problem, but I was just automatically dismissed for a job like that. I still remember that. I think that was probably the biggest blatant, no, you're a girl, you can't do it, thing that I know of that I faced. When I was going up for that HBO job, I had just graduated, and the filmmaker said to me, I was really thinking about having a guy work with me because, it's about drugs and drug usage and stuff. And I don't know about having a female with me. And I went away from that thinking, I think he's wrong. And I wrote him an email telling him that if he wants people to open up to him, 2 guys are not going to be conducive to that. He'll have me there. People will want to open up to me. and he'll get the interviews that he wants for HBO if he hires me. And he did. So I remember, so that was like the one kind of blatant, I don't know if I want to hire you because you're a woman. And then me saying, let me tell you why you should hire me. Those are sort of the biggest barriers that I think I want to talk about, that are like very tangible, like you need to fight against that kind of things. Other things have been a lot more subtle and sort of put in place by other women, which are a little harder to pinpoint and talk about. But there's definitely been some like bias there for from females, gender bias from females.
Wow.
What is that like? Or can you talk about that?
Oh,
You don't have to. It's
I
fine.
don't know if I can.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even know how to couch it in a way. Like it feels like a really long conversation to talk about how females can be sexist.
Is it like
against other females?
Is it like a internalized misogyny where like it's like some people frame it that they live in a world where they can only be one, like one female documentarian in the room or one female filmmaker, as opposed to like doing the approach of like, let me uplift and like bring you on a project?
No, I haven't felt that from any filmmakers, female filmmakers. I mean, there aren't that many. I just want to be very clear about this. The Filipino filmmakers who I have met have been fantastic. We are family. We work together. In fact, Brown Girls documentary Mafia is Brown Girl. What are we called? Brown Girls Doc Mafia. It was a Facebook group started by women of color in documentary film, and we all champion each other's work. We get together at the different film festivals, and we tell each other about the jobs that are out there. And even when they're like not pointedly for a diverse group, we're like, apply for this grant, apply for this job, get it, make it one of ours. So particularly Ramona Diaz has been so instrumental in supporting me, being there, being a mentor, talking to me. She's executive producer of the Filipino American War documentary. She's just there to like help me out. What I'm talking about more was a position of where I was working for an organization, and the supervisor said to me, because I had to give the footage that I had filmed and get it uploaded somehow. And her advice was, go over to the CNN guys and flirt with them and see if you can get them to upload your footage for us.
That's gross.
And so gross. And it was just it was comments like that. But yeah.
Understood.
So Marissa, unfortunately we're out of time, but I just want to thank you for doing this interview. It's been a long time coming, and I also want to just commend you for the work that you do in documenting our histories, our stories, telling our stories through film. I used it in my classes. I've seen yours in other classes, and it's just such a great teaching tool, and you're just doing such a great job doing it.
Yes, and thank you so much
you guys
for the work that you've done. And I totally recall like you being at LA Asian Pacific Film Festival and using whatever weight I could to get into that screening, just because it was sold out and I was lazy.
really?
So I most likely was like,
best.
I did this for so long. Let me get in there and sit on the floor or something. But
She bribed somebody.
Probably. And any future projects, you can definitely look to us to promote or do something. If if there's a Kickstarter or Indiegogo, we will most likely promote it because that's what we do and support you all.
Oh my God, Elaine, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. That screening in particular was so special to me. And I'm just so happy to be on your podcast, and you guys are doing great work. So thank you, Michael, Elaine, Ryan, Joe.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So are you still fundraising? Can we direct people to your Kickstarter or Indigo? I forgot what you had, but
Yeah, I forgot.
yeah.
I think I have a PayPal funding thing. Yes, people can actually, and I will send you the link.
Great. And we'll post that on our socials and everything like that.
Yes. Everyone, we should create a
Thank you.
number. What should we say so that we can know that it was like they listened to the show? Make it like really random.
What?
Like 7. Wait, when was
Wait,
the.
What
the-
are you saying, Elaine?
Okay, so the Filipino American War happened between 1893 and
1899,
1899 and
1902.
1902.
Well, officially.
Officially.
But yeah.
Okay, officially.
Yeah.
So if you donate between 1899 and 1902, we know that you are a TFAL listener that has given money
Sure.
to or $1,899 and $1,900.02.
There you go.
We know that you've listened to TFAL and are supporting Marissa's new film.
I okay.
From your people's wallets.
I'll go with it, Elaine.
Yeah.
I was trying to make it fun.
And where else can people contact you?
They can contact me on Twitter and Facebook. I've kind of got it. Twitter is probably the easiest way to get in contact with me.
Okay.
And
What's your handle?
at Marissa Arroy, all one word.
Great. Perfect. Well, thank you again, Marissa.
Yay.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat.
That was delicious. Ouch. Delicious.
So delicious.
cool. Thank you.
Oh, I'm going to put that on my business card, guys.
Ouch, so delicious. Good job, Brian.
All right. Thank you, Marissa.
All right. Bye. Good
Bye.
night.
This Filipino American Life is produced by Michael Nailat. Our intro and outro music is by Roger Habon, aka 10.4 Raj. Resident reality checker Girly Colado, legal advisor Rianne Fajardo, and graphic design by Vincent Collyer.